The ballroom of the Grand Sapphire Hotel glowed like a fairy tale palace. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above white roses and cascading orchids, draped with golden ribbons. Every table was adorned with delicate candles and monogrammed napkins, R&M, for Raheel and Maya. Outside, luxury cars lined the valet entrance, while photographers clicked away at arriving celebrities in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. The media was calling it the wedding of the year. Cameras flashed relentlessly as anchors speculated about the couple's honeymoon destination, wedding dress designer, and the rumored multi-crore price tag of the event. Maya stood in her bridal suite, surrounded by stylists, makeup artists, and an anxious wedding planner with a clipboard clutched tightly in her hands. She wore a heavily embellished lehenga in ivory and champagne gold, her diamond necklace glittering with every movement. "You look like royalty," whispered her best friend, who stood in awe behind her. Maya gave a tight-lipped smile as she studied herself in the mirror. Her eyes sparkled, but beneath the shimmer was a flicker of something else, uncertainty, or perhaps fatigue from the endless pre-wedding chaos. Still, this was the moment she'd dreamed of. She was marrying Raheel Malik, the most eligible billionaire in the country. Meanwhile, Raheel adjusted his black velvet sherwani in his private suite, staring at his reflection with an expression that was hard to read. He looked every bit the dashing groom, tall, composed, and confident. But when the door shut behind his final stylist, the facade slipped ever so slightly. He sat down quietly, running a hand over his neatly trimmed beard, his brow furrowed. Something lingered in his eyes. Was it guilt? Or fear? Outside in the hallway, staff bustled about as final touches were made to the floral arches and the customized aisle runner. The air was thick with excitement, perfumes, and the faint tension that only a billion-rupee wedding could create. Somewhere between the gleam of gold-plated cutlery and choreographed dance rehearsals, the whispers began. "I heard there was another woman," murmured the assistant planner to a catering staff member. "Something about a past marriage. They buried it. Or tried to." Her voice dropped as she glanced nervously over her shoulder. "It's probably just gossip. Rich people always have some scandal." "Yeah, well," the waiter replied as he carried a tray of sparkling drinks. "Hope it stays buried today." Back in Raheel's room, his younger brother Zion tried to lighten the mood. "You ready, bye? Maya's probably already posing for the camera." Raheel offered a hollow chuckle. "Of course. It's showtime." He rose slowly, buttoned the final clasp on his sherwani, and walked toward the mirror. Picking up his cufflinks, platinum, engraved with his initials, he stared at them for a long moment before fastening them with precise care. He glanced once more into the mirror. The charming billionaire everyone adored was back in place. No cracks, no weakness. As the music swelled in the grand hall and guests began to take their seats, Raheel took a deep breath and stepped out of his room, flanked by security and family. But with every step toward the altar, the whisper in his mind grew louder. Not everyone you leave behind stays silent. Some return. And some return pregnant, with proof. 2 years earlier, the wedding had been nothing like the one Raheel was having now. There were no chandeliers, no celebrity guests, no designer outfits. Just a quiet ceremony at a small registrar's office, followed by tea and cake at a modest cafe tucked away in an old neighborhood. Mehak wore a soft peach shalwar kameez with lace sleeves, and Raheel, in a simple white kurta, signed the nikah papers with a confident hand and a loving smile. He held her hand after, leaned in, and whispered, "You're mine now. And I'll take care of you always." Mehak believed him. She was a literature graduate with dreams of becoming a writer someday, someone who found joy in chai on the balcony, long walks through bookstores, and handwritten letters. Raheel, with his business savvy and commanding presence, had swept her off her feet during a charity event. He'd said he was drawn to her simplicity, her mind, her honesty. And Mehak, who had never been part of the rich, glamorous world he came from, had fallen for the man who saw her for who she truly was, or so she thought. The day after the wedding, they returned to their separate homes. "Just for a little while," Raheel had said. "My family doesn't know yet. They wouldn't understand. They want someone high profile for me, someone who helps the business image. But I'll tell them soon, I promise. Just give me time. Mehak, head over heels and trusting, nodded. Okay. Days turned to weeks, weeks into months. They met quietly, mostly in Rahil's private apartment. He was attentive, gentle, affectionate. But always, it had to be a secret. Just a little more time, he would say. They'll accept it once I break the news gently. It wasn't until Mehak missed her period that things changed. At first, she was nervous. Then, when the test confirmed she was pregnant, she was overjoyed. She imagined their baby. Tiny fingers, warm cheeks, the first laugh. When she told Rahil, he stared at her for a long time. Too long. You're sure? He asked, and she nodded, smiling. This is good, right? We can finally come out and tell your family. They'll have to accept us now. But Rahil didn't smile. He pulled away, running his hands through his hair. Mehak, it's complicated. This will make things harder right now. Her heart sank. You said you'd tell them. I know what I said, he interrupted, his voice sharper than usual. But now isn't the time. There are some major deals happening. Investors, board meetings, brand campaigns. This pregnancy, he paused, it needs to be kept quiet. Just for a while. Mehak nodded slowly, feeling the beginnings of a storm in her chest. Over the next few weeks, Rahil became more distant. His visits stopped. His calls became short, distracted. Work's insane, he would say. I'm traveling a lot. Don't overthink it. But she did overthink. She lay awake at night, one hand on her growing belly, the other clutching her phone that never rang anymore. Her mother asked where Rahil was. Busy, Mehak would lie. He's just really busy. Then, one night, scrolling through social media to distract herself from the silence, Mehak's thumb froze. A page she didn't even follow had tagged Rahil in an event photo. He stood in the center of the frame, wearing a crisp black tuxedo. Next to him was a woman in a backless red dress, leaning into him with a laugh. Maya. Mehak had never heard of her, but the caption read, Power couple of the season, billionaire Rahil Malik and fashion icon Maya Arif spotted together again at the elite gala. Her heart thudded painfully. She clicked the tag. More photos. A vacation in Dubai. A jewelry launch. A beach party. All within the last month. The same month he'd told her he was too busy to call. Tears blurred her vision as she stared at the glowing smiles, the way Maya looked at him, the way he didn't look like a man with a wife, or an unborn child. She scrolled further. Headlines. Speculations. Will Rahil Malik finally tie the knot? The next business royalty wedding? Mehak set the phone down carefully, as if afraid it might explode. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was erasure. She wasn't just being abandoned. She was being replaced. Publicly. And without a single ounce of shame. She stood in the middle of her apartment, hand resting on her stomach, and whispered. He lied. The baby kicked. The next morning, Mehak woke up determined, though her body felt heavier than ever. Sleep had been elusive. Visions of Rahil laughing with Maya haunted her each time she closed her eyes. She tried to tell herself it couldn't be true, that the media exaggerated everything. Maybe it was a publicity stunt. Maybe Rahil had a reason. But the growing dread in her chest told her the truth was uglier than her mind could grasp. She dressed slowly, pulling on a loose kurta that no longer hid her swollen belly. 7 months in, the pregnancy was visible to the world, but her marriage was invisible, erased. She needed answers, and there was only one place she could go. Rahil's corporate office towered above the city skyline like a monument to power. She'd been there once before, when they were newly married. He had proudly shown her around, hand on her back, introducing her as someone special. That day, his staff had smiled and nodded politely. Today, those same people averted their eyes the moment she walked through the glass doors. The receptionist glanced up and then down again, pretending to type. A man in a suit walking past did a double take at her belly before slipping quickly into a conference room. Even the security guard gave her a strained look. "Is Mr. Raheel Malik in today?" she asked the receptionist, who cleared her throat awkwardly. Let me check. Do you have an appointment, ma'am?" "I don't need one," Mehak replied firmly. "I'm his wife." That word, wife, hung in the air like smoke. The receptionist fumbled with her phone and then gestured for someone behind the desk. A young assistant with headphones and a clipboard stepped forward. "Mr. Malik is in a meeting right now," he said quickly. "Maybe you can come back later?" "I won't be leaving," Mehak said, her voice trembling. "I need to see him." The assistant paused, eyes darting toward the corridor. "Maybe you should wait in the lounge." Mehak followed him down the hall, her footsteps echoing louder than necessary. As she sat down in the plush waiting area, voices from the conference room drifted out, muffled but unmistakable. "The wedding is scheduled for tomorrow. Security will be tight. Media presence is already confirmed." Mehak's breath caught. "Wedding. Tomorrow." She leaned closer. "She's rehearsing her walk this afternoon. The press release goes out tonight. Everything has to be airtight. Raheel doesn't want any surprises." Her vision blurred. Tomorrow. It wasn't speculation anymore. It wasn't rumor. It was real. She pressed her hand to her stomach as a sharp pain twisted through her abdomen. The baby kicked hard, as if sensing her turmoil. She stood abruptly and stormed toward the assistant still holding his clipboard. "You knew," she hissed. "You all knew." He looked panicked. I wasn't supposed to say anything, please." "You knew he's marrying Maya tomorrow. When he's still married to me. I'm carrying his child." Her voice cracked with rage and disbelief. Other staff peeked nervously from behind their desks. Someone whispered into a phone. Mehak's chest heaved, her legs wobbling. She gripped the nearby wall for balance as another sharp throb surged through her lower back. She nearly collapsed, but the assistant rushed to steady her. "Please sit here," he said, guiding her back to the lounge chair. "I want proof," she gasped, still trembling. "You said wedding. Give me the invitation. Anything." He hesitated, then looked around and slowly pulled a cream envelope from his folder. He placed it in her hand without a word and backed away. Mehak tore it open with shaking fingers. Inside was a thick card, gold-lettered, embossed, with Raheel and Maya's names intertwined. "Together with their families. Raheel Malik and Maya Arif request the honor of your presence." Her hand clenched the card so tightly it bent at the corners. A bitter laugh escaped her lips, thin and hollow. So this was how it ended. Not with a fight. Not even with a goodbye. Just a card. A celebration of betrayal. She stood slowly, her heart pounding with something stronger than grief. Anger. Fire. Resolve. "I'm going to that wedding," she said quietly to herself. "But I won't go empty-handed." She walked out of the building with the invitation tucked under her arm like a weapon. She had one day to gather the truth, the documents, the memories they'd tried to erase. Raheel thought he could bury her. But tomorrow she'd rise, right in front of everyone. Back in her apartment, Mehak sat on the floor, surrounded by scattered papers, files, and photo albums. Her hands moved quickly but with care, digging through drawers, pulling out folders she hadn't touched in months. Her marriage certificate lay flat on the table, the ink crisp, the signatures undeniable. She stared at it for a moment, feeling the ache of what it once represented: love, commitment, trust. Now, it was her weapon. She pulled out the ultrasound images next, dated and labeled. Her name. Raheel's name. The small, blurry outline of a baby curled in her womb. The first time she'd seen those images, she had cried with joy. Now, she cried with fury. Then came the photos, candids of her and Raheel in his private apartment, on their short getaway to Murray, celebrating her birthday with cake and flowers. Not a single one had been shared publicly. But they existed. And soon, the world would know. With her documents in a folder, she called the only person she trusted with legal knowledge, her old friend Arif, who now worked at a mid-tier law firm downtown. Within an hour, she sat across from him at his office desk, watching his face pale as he read through her papers. This is bad, Arif muttered, flipping between the certificate and the invitation she had shown him. If he's still legally married to you, this wedding tomorrow isn't just unethical, it's illegal. He can't legally marry Maya without divorcing you first. So what happens if he does? Mehak asked, her tone cold. He could face charges of bigamy. It could affect his reputation, his business, everything. Especially if this goes public. Arif looked at her, concern flickering in his eyes. Are you sure you want to go down this road? I'm not the one who paved it, she replied sharply. I just want him to see that I exist. He gave her a long, quiet look, then slowly nodded. Then take everything. Every single paper. Make copies, keep the originals. And be careful, Mehak. Men like Raheel don't like being exposed. When she returned home, the atmosphere was tense. Her mother stood in the kitchen, nervously folding the same dish towel again and again. She had seen the news. She had read the rumors. And now, she had seen the invitation in Mehak's hands. Don't go, she pleaded. Beta, you're pregnant. What if something happens to you? What if they hurt you? Humiliation is one thing, but your health, your child. Mehak gently placed the folder on the table. Emmy, I didn't choose this pain. I didn't choose this battle. But he made it mine. He's having a grand wedding tomorrow, as if I don't exist. As if this baby doesn't exist. He needs to see what he destroyed. Her mother's eyes welled with tears. She opened her mouth to argue, but then stopped. There was something in Mehak's eyes, steel, purpose, unshakable resolve. It wasn't the voice of a scorned woman. It was the voice of someone who had nothing left to lose. That night, Mehak packed a small handbag with her documents, photos, and ID. She chose a modest navy blue dress with a matching dupatta, simple earrings, and flat shoes. No makeup, no perfume. She didn't need to look like a queen. She only needed to look like the truth. At exactly 6 p.m., her cab pulled up outside the apartment. The driver stepped out to help her in. She placed a protective hand on her belly as she settled into the seat, the folder clutched tightly in her lap. As the city lights flickered past the windows and the radio hummed low in the background, Mehak stared ahead, unblinking. Tomorrow, the cameras would be there. The guests. The flashing lights. The priest asking if anyone had an objection. She would be that objection. And this time, she wouldn't be silent. The wedding was the kind most people only saw in magazines. The Grand Sapphire Hotel's ballroom had been transformed into a floral dream. Thousands of white roses, cherry blossom trees at every corner, gold chandeliers dimmed to the perfect glow, and a crystal aisle runner stretching down the center like a path to royalty. Guests dressed in silks and sequins whispered to each other, taking discreet photos while a string quartet played a romantic tune in the background. Socialites, CEOs, influencers, and dignitaries sat in their assigned gold-trimmed chairs, sipping imported beverages, eyes glued to the aisle. At the far end stood Raheel, dressed in an ivory sherwani embroidered in gold thread. He looked impeccable, every strand of hair in place, every movement calculated. He smiled as the cameras flashed, as guests waved, as a drone hovered overhead capturing the moment from above. But behind that perfectly charming smile, his jaw clenched, his palms slightly damp. He scanned the crowd once. Then again. A flicker of unease passed across his face. She's not coming, he muttered under his breath, mostly to himself. She won't do it. At the grand entrance, Maya appeared at last, dressed in a breathtaking crimson and gold lehenga. A collective sigh filled the room. The bride was stunning. Her jewelry glistened under the lights, her veil trailed behind her like a river of rubies, and her smile was flawless. A moment carefully choreographed for the media. Cameras clicked furiously as she took her first step down the aisle, her father holding her arm proudly. Each step was rehearsed, graceful. The crowd began to clap slowly, rhythmically. The music swelled. This was the fairy tale wedding they had come to witness. But before Maya could reach the altar, the grand doors at the back of the hall creaked open once more. Slowly, uninvited, heads turned, and gasps followed. There she stood, Mehak. 7 months pregnant, wearing a simple navy dress, hair pulled back, eyes fierce and steady. Her presence was like a crack of thunder in a silent forest. The clapping stopped. The music faltered. Whispers started to rise. Who is she? She's pregnant. What is she doing here? Mehak walked forward, not rushed, not hesitant, but with the slow, certain steps of someone who had nothing to lose. All eyes turned from the bride to the stranger. Maya paused mid-step, her eyes narrowing in confusion. Rahil's face drained of color. His hand fell from the edge of the dais. One of the coordinators hurried toward Mehak, whispering, "Ma'am, you can't be here. This is a private." Mehak ignored her and stepped onto the aisle, raising her voice. "Before this wedding goes any further," she called, her voice shaking but strong, "everyone here deserves to know the truth." A hush fell so deep that even the chandeliers seemed to stop swaying. The priest stood frozen. Rahil's lips parted slightly, as if to stop her, but nothing came out. "I am Mehak Ali," she continued, "and I am Rahil Malik's wife." The room erupted. Cameras turned in unison. The silence burst into a wave of shocked murmurs, cries, and disbelief. Maya's mouth fell open, her eyes flicking toward Rahil in horror. Her father stepped forward, confused and alarmed. Mehak reached into her bag and pulled out the folder, holding the document high above her head with a trembling hand. "This is our marriage certificate, signed, stamped, and legal. 2 years ago, Rahil married me, in secret. I am also 7 months pregnant with his child." A collective gasp swept through the hall. The flashes of paparazzi cameras became a storm. Rahil finally stepped down from the stage, moving toward her, his face pale. "Mehak, please," he muttered, trying to reach her arm. She stepped back, lifting the ultrasound photo now. "This is your child," she said, voice cracking. "The one you left. The one you denied. And now you're standing here about to marry someone else as if none of this ever happened." Maya's hands dropped her bouquet. It hit the floor with a dull thud. Her face had gone ghostly white. "You told me you were single," she whispered to Rahil, almost too quietly to be heard. "You said you had no attachments. No secrets." Rahil stammered, reaching for her. "Maya, I can explain." "No." She cut him off, backing away. "No, you can't." Reporters surged forward despite the staff's efforts to control the chaos. Guests stood from their seats, unsure whether to leave or watch the train wreck unfold. And Mehak. She just stood there, visibly pregnant, tears threatening to fall, but not quite. She had said what needed to be said. She had taken back her voice. "Let them all see. Let him drown in the truth." Rahil's face contorted with panic as Mehak's words echoed through the ballroom. His eyes darted around, cameras, shocked guests, Maya's stunned expression, his own parents frozen in disbelief. Every carefully planned moment of the wedding unraveled in front of him. "Enough!" he barked suddenly, striding forward, trying to take the documents from Mehak's hands. "Put that down, Mehak. This isn't the place." She jerked her arm away, standing her ground. "Isn't the place? You were about to marry another woman while still married to me. While I carry your child." Her voice rose, unwavering. "You've treated me like a dirty secret, like I never existed. But I did. I do. And so does your child." The crowd gasped again. Someone in the front row stood up, filming with their phone. Rahil glanced at the cameras and then at the guests, business partners, government officials, media friends. His mask of composure cracked. "We can talk about this in private," he muttered through clenched teeth. No, Mehak shot back. You made your betrayal public. Now deal with the consequences in public. She pulled out another paper, the ultrasound report. This is your daughter. The one who will grow up knowing her father chose shame over love. Maya stood frozen at the altar, clutching her chest. Her face was drained of color. Her father whispered urgently in her ear, but she didn't hear a word. Her eyes were locked on Raheel. Is it true? She asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Raheel stepped toward her. Maya, listen, I didn't tell you because I thought it was over. She was supposed to. Supposed to what? Maya cut him off, her voice rising now. Disappear? Stay hidden while you built your image with me. Raheel tried to reach for her, but Maya slapped his hand away. The sound echoed louder than any microphone. Her diamond bangles jingled sharply as she stepped back. You told me you were single. You said you'd never been married. You said this, us, was real. She turned to the crowd, voice breaking. This is what he does. This is what he is. Without another word, Maya stepped down from the stage, lifted her skirt, and walked straight out of the hall, her bridal veil trailing behind her like a flag of surrender. Her family followed her, shielding her from the flashing cameras and murmuring chaos. Raheel stood in place, shell-shocked, as guests whispered all around him. I heard he forged business licenses last year too. There will be lawsuits. She has proof. He's finished. The media won't spare him. His parents, seated in the front row, looked as if they might pass out from shame. His mother clutched her dupatta tightly, her face ghostly pale. His father leaned forward with a hand over his mouth, not daring to meet anyone's eyes. They had never liked the idea of Mehak, had forced Raheel to keep the marriage hidden, convinced it would harm his image. Now, everything they had tried to avoid had exploded in front of society's most powerful people. One of Raheel's uncles rose quietly and walked away, not wanting his face in the inevitable viral videos. A reporter from a news agency whispered into her mic, what was supposed to be the wedding of the year has just turned into the scandal of the decade. The wedding coordinator, nearly in tears, approached the mic on the side of the stage and tapped it twice. Ladies and gentlemen, she began hesitantly, the ceremony is now postponed. We request all guests to kindly move to the banquet area for refreshments. But no one moved. No one clapped. The magic was gone. The fantasy had shattered. Raheel didn't wait to hear another word. With a stormy expression, he turned from the stage and walked away, shoving past the curtains toward the exit. Mehak watched him go, her chest heaving, heart pounding, but she did not cry. Not anymore. She didn't come to destroy the wedding. She came to tell the truth. And the truth did the rest. By morning, the headlines were everywhere. Pregnant wife crashes billionaire wedding. Raheel Malik exposed at altar. She showed up with a baby bump and a marriage certificate. Now the nation can't stop talking. Clips from the wedding went viral across every social media platform. One shaky video, shot by a guest from the second row, showed Mehak stepping forward, holding up the marriage certificate with her belly clearly visible. Another caught the exact moment Maya slapped Raheel. The internet exploded. Within hours, the hashtags #RaheelExposed and #JusticeForMehak were trending nationwide. People were glued to their screens. Reels, reaction videos, duets, and even memes flooded the internet. Influencers dissected the timeline. News anchors debated the legality. Talk shows began booking psychologists and legal experts to discuss emotional manipulation, gaslighting, and bigamy. Raheel, once seen as a visionary entrepreneur, was now portrayed as a liar, a coward, and a fraud. Brands began pulling out of partnerships. His face was removed from campaign billboards. One of his biggest investors released a statement distancing their firm from all associations with Mr. Malik, citing personal conduct in conflict with company values. Shares of his primary company took a visible dip. Raheel's PR team tried damage control, but the internet was relentless. His silence only made it worse. Meanwhile, Maya's family wasn't silent at all. They released an official statement the next afternoon, confirming Maya had suffered emotional trauma, reputational harm, and psychological distress. Her father's legal team filed a civil suit against Raheel, claiming defamation, emotional damages, and breach of verbal contract regarding wedding arrangements. The statement was sharp, strategic, and cold. Maya herself made no public appearance, but her absence spoke volumes. And while the world speculated, Mehak chose quiet. Journalists gathered outside her building. News channels sent messages begging for interviews. Talk shows promised six-figure fees if she'd appear, even just for 10 minutes. She received flowers, letters, gifts from strangers calling her brave, inspiring, a warrior. Online comments flooded in, most of them supportive. You didn't just save yourself. You saved a generation of women from silence. Your daughter will grow up knowing her mother was fearless. Thank you for standing up and speaking out when so many of us couldn't. But Mehak didn't respond to any of them. One afternoon, while feeding Era on the couch, Mehak looked down at her daughter's tiny fingers wrapped tightly around hers. The TV hummed softly in the background, a news segment about Raheel's company facing lawsuits, public protests, investor withdrawals. Mehak didn't flinch. She didn't smile either. Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about survival. She had once been invisible, a secret, a mistake he tried to bury. But now, with Era in her arms and the world reading her words, Mehak knew she had become something far greater than a wife. She was a warrior. And she had just begun. 2 years later, the sunlight streamed gently through the garden canopy, dappling soft white roses and lavender petals that lined the aisle. It was a small ceremony, nothing flashy, nothing extravagant, just laughter, music, and love that felt honest and warm. Guests sat beneath flowing white drapes, wiping happy tears and capturing every moment on their phones. At the end of the aisle stood Mehak, radiant in a simple white dress that flowed like peace itself. Her hair was curled loosely, her makeup light, her smile unshakably calm. This wasn't about proving anything. This was about joy. Real, quiet, hard-earned joy. Beside her stood the man she was marrying, Dr. Amar, a pediatrician with gentle eyes and a kind smile who had come into her life during one of Era's routine checkups. He had never pushed, never pried, only listened, respected, and supported. What began as kindness grew into friendship, and then, slowly, something deeper. He loved Era as his own. And Mehak, cautious but healing, had allowed herself to love again. Era, now a lively toddler in a cream dress with a flower crown, giggled as she toddled down the aisle ahead of her mother, tossing petals into the air. Guests clapped and cheered, and Amar knelt to kiss her cheek as she reached him. When Mehak reached the altar, she paused. For just a second. She glanced at her daughter, then at the man waiting for her. Not with secrets, but with steady eyes and an open heart. She took a deep breath, and whispered, "This time, it's not a secret." Amar squeezed her hand, and together they turned to face the future. "And it's not a lie."